Alrighty, Code Bacon welcomes you to this video. We are going to talk about Flask today. Yeah, it's this backend web application framework, right? What it's going to allow us to do is create a server that we're going to be able to make requests to. And we are going to make a request to this amazing API, Chuck Norris IO. I love Chuck Norris. He's awesome. And his jokes are even better. So this API, whoever created this, um, does it say? Anyways, whoever it was, they're amazing and they made an API that we can make a request to get a random Chuck Norris joke. Now, some of these may be naughty, and if so, I apologize. You never know what you're going to get. And what they've done is they've set up this little link here, API chucknorris.io jokes random. And when you go to it, it gives you a random joke. And that's what we're going to use is our backend is going to do a request to this API right here, this URL, and it's going to be able, and we'll be able to pull out the joke, right? Chuck Norris can play Angry Birds from a payphone. That one's really good. Anyways, so what we're going to do is create a backend kind of like this one. Like this is a backend. When we do a request to chucknorris.io/jokes/random, that backend knows to return to us a JSON object here with this information. And then we can take this JSON in our own applications and we can use the key of value to be able to pull out the joke. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to create a backend where we can define these endpoints, is what they're called, /whatever/whatever, and then we can tell that endpoint to do something. And in our case, our endpoint in our backend is going to do a request to this API to get the joke. But when you set up these endpoints, they could do database calls, they could serve up a web page, they can do all kinds of different things. But in what we're going to do, we're just going to create a Flask server that will call this API and grab the joke. All right, so let's get going with that. So I have this folder. If you're following along, just create a folder. And in this folder, we need to create, our virtual environments and all that kind of stuff. So I've opened that folder inside of Visual Studio Code. I'm going to go view terminal and we got to set everything up. So I'm going to create my virtual environment. Remember, Windows and Macs are a little different here. Windows, you might have to type Python 3. Sometimes PyWorks, and Macs, I think it's Python 3 as well. But we're saying use the module venv and create the virtual environment inside of a folder called venv. If you're not sure what's going on here, I do have a video that talks about Python virtual environments if you want to check that out. Okay, well, it's been created. So now that we have the virtual environment, we need to create it or activate it. And again, that'll be kind of different depending on Mac and PC and all that. But I know it's activated because it's in my parentheses here. So now I need to pip install Flask. That is going to let us use Flask. I know, pretty crazy, right? All right, next thing I want to do, create a new file here. We'll call it server.py. And we are going to create our backend. We are going to create a similar thing to here. We're going to be able to define our endpoints, our whatever/whatever/whatever, or just whatever here, right? We're going to define what endpoint and then what that endpoint does. So first thing, let's get Flask in here. And we're going to use another thing called JSONify, which just converts things into JSON. And that is what this is here. This is a JSON object. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And the telltale sign that it's JSON is the keys are in quotes, and so are the values here. But this is just a common way to share data across websites and things like that. Like JSON can be used in Python, JavaScript, Java. It's this data format that is universal, and that's why it's used a lot. And it just makes pulling data and from different websites and databases and things a lot easier. It's pretty slick. Okay. Oh, by the way, if you don't have this raw parsed thing here, like you may be seeing it like this. But if you're in Chrome, I'm in Brave here. If you just go to your, what is it? Mm, 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 extensions. Yeah, we're gonna go to the web store here. If you just do a search for like JSON, just get one of these. This is what allows me to look at the JSON in a formatted way. You can just get one of these JSON formatters for your browser, and that's going to allow you to see JSON. You know, that's a lot easier to read than the raw, right? So that's all I've done is I've just installed this JSON formatter into my browser. Okay, so let's head back. So I've imported Flask. Now I need to create the Flask app. So I'm just going to basically create an instance of Flask here. Now, underscore name here. This is basically, this stores the file or the name of the file that I'm running this from. I'm running it from main, so name is going to be main. And so down here, I'm going to say if my name, this is a built-in like variable in Python here. So if my name here is underscore main, I'm going to run my Flask app and I'm going to say debug is going to be true. So basically what happens here is it's saying if name is equal to main, well, what does that mean, right? If main is your name variable here in Python, that means that I'm running this code directly from the file itself. That means eventually I'm going to down here, I'm going to say py server.py. I'm going to run the code directly from this file, and that's going to make the name, the built-in name variable, be equal to main. If I was importing this code somewhere else, then name would be something different. But this is basically just it's just saying, hey, look, I'm going to run this code. I'm going to run this server if I'm running this code directly from server.py, which I'm going to be. Okay. So anyways, let's try that. Well, I have my server. It's running. That's what's so cool about Flask. It's lightweight, right? It doesn't take a lot of code to get this up and running. I just create a new instance of Flask here. I pass in my name, which is main, right? And now I have a Flask server stored inside of app. And so if I'm running the code from this file, if name is equal to main, cool, app.run, that runs the server. Now debug equals true allows us to, it prints out a bunch of errors and things in the terminal and in the website or the browser. It just helps us debug. So if you're developing and creating your Flask server, yeah, I would definitely turn this on. It's going to help your life be a lot easier. Okay, just stop it. You just hit Control C. Okay, and then the server stops. And notice when it's running on 127.0.0.1, port 5000. So I don't know if you've ever seen the t-shirts, but they say there's no place like 127.0.0.1. That's kind of a geeky humor to say, hey, home. This is like the home homepage. That's like the default homepage. This is the default IP address. This is called an IP address of home. And then this is what's called a port. Every application has its own port that it runs on. If you've done development in other languages, they have their own ports. Flask uses 5000. React uses its own. Minecraft, if you set up like a Minecraft server, it's going to run on its own port. Like all these different applications have their own ports that they use. It's just so you can have different things, right? So now I can have a Flask server running on my home IP address. I could have a React app running on my home IP address. It's just so you can have multiple different things running on the same IP. That's really all that does. Okay, so right now my server's pretty lame. It's not doing anything that amazing. It's actually not really doing anything except for running. So I need to set up these endpoints. Just like this has an endpoint of joke/random, I want to have endpoints on my server. Okay, so let's do that. To do that, I use @app.route. Okay, this is how you define your endpoint. And I want the endpoint to just be slash. That means home. That means nothing, right? And then the methods that I'm going to use to go to this endpoint is get. So this is going to be a get request. When that gets accessed, I'm going to run this function called home, and I'm going to return the string, why hello there. And I'll do single quotes. Just keep it standard here. All right, so what is going on here? Well, this means if I do a get request, that's what this methods means. If I do a get request on the home route, then it's going to run this function called home, and it's going to return the string why hello there. Now, when I access this via a browser, I can do, let's see, it's just going to be the home route, right? That's what this means. When there's nothing after it, that means it's empty. It's the home route. It should return why hello there. Now, when you access this via a browser, you're doing a get request by default. That's what a browser does. It does get requests. Now, there's other types of requests, like if I was going to give data to a server, that would be a post request. If I'm going to update things, that's a put or a patch request. So there are all kinds of different requests. We're not going to worry about those in this video. We're just going to focus on get, but get is just that, the browser going to the backend or the server saying, hey, I need information. It's getting information. So it's a get request. Now let's get the server running and let's see if this works. Okay, server's running. Now, by the way, this server's running in this terminal window. If I wanted to run extra commands and things, I would either have to close out the server, run the commands, or open new terminal windows. You need you need to be careful too. Sometimes you'll leave your server on and you forget. So it's always a good habit to get into is when you're done with your server, make sure you turn it off. Okay, but it's running. So let me kind of move this over here and let's go to it. This is the home route, right? Nothing after it, nothing after it. So let's go to it, see what it does. All right, so it worked. It showed, it gave us a timestamp, right? That, hey, this server was accessed with a GET request, and it returned, let's bring this down a little bit, and it returned the string, why hello there, why hello there. So we now built a server with an endpoint. Whenever they go to the home route, in other words, nothing after the port, it's going to return why hello there. So pretty cool. So we can create how many routes we want. And these routes can, like I said, call databases, they can call APIs, they can give back web pages, they can do all kinds of different things. In this case, we want it to call an API. So let's create another one. This one's going to be activated when we go to the endpoint /joke, because that's what it is. We're getting a joke. And I want this endpoint to fire off when we do a GET request. And then it's going to run this function called get Chuck Norris joke. Okay, so now we need to think this through. When they access /joke, right, what do we need to happen? Well, we need it to call this API, get this JSON, and then we need to pull out the value of value, right? We need to pull out the value of the key of value, right? Because that's where the joke is located. Okay, so first thing we got to do is call the API, get the data back, convert it into JSON, and then return it, display it, do whatever we're going to do. So we're going to do that using another package here that we need to install. So I'm going to say pip install requests. This is requests is another thing that exists in Python. Just like we had to install Flask, we're installing requests, and that's going to give us the ability to make requests. It's going to give us the ability to actually call this API, grab this data, and do something with it. So now that we have that installed, we're going to import it so we can use it. And then here we go. I'm going to create a variable called response. I'm going to set it equal to, we're going to use requests. And then we say dot, the type of request we're doing a GET request, right? We're going to do a GET request to get this JSON back from this API. So GET, and the thing it wants is what URL, right? It's well, yeah, I mean, Visual Studio Code's helping us out here. So what URL are we doing that request to? Well, this one right here. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in there. And we do have to put it in as a string. So we're using this request module here, or package. And when we say request.get, that means we're doing a GET request to this URL. Now, just so we can kind of see what's happening here, I'm going to print out response to kind of see what we get back. So let's run the server. Okay, and I'm going to do the request. And this will show us a bunch of things. It'll show us, hey, is this endpoint working? Is request working? Did it try? You know, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to just say /joke here. So that endpoint should fire off and then it should run this function. Okay. This is okay. And this is actually showing us what this debug equals true does. It'll give us these type of error pages, which are really helpful. It says the view function did not return a valid response. In other words, with these routes, you have to return something or you'll get errors like this. And that's okay. What we care about right now is, well, I don't know if it printed it out or not. Well, let's appease them. Let's say return response. Okay, let's try it again. So, right. Okay, so this is what we're going to ignore all this. This will go away once we actually start returning what it wants. Because right now and this is good seeing this as well, because this is what request gives us. When request does a GET, it returns its own kind of specific object here. And we can see this is what it returned right here, this object with a 200. This 200 is a status code. So I can actually say .status code, and let's return that as well. And this will kind of give us an idea of what request does. Right, so we can see, yeah, so here's our status code of 200. And this is just something that's built into the request library, right? So let's not return it. Let's not worry about the returns right now. So now that I know that it gives me this status code, well, what is a status code? A status code tells us if it gives us information about the request. A status code of 200, so I can say if response.status code is equal to 200, that means that the request went through and it was successful. You've seen them and you may have not even noticed a 404, like not found, right? I'm sure you've seen that on websites before. That is a status code. There's an HTTP request status code. 404 means it was not found. So, but 200 is good. So I can say if the status code of this response, because what happens is request goes out there, it does this GET request, and then it returns its own little object or dictionary thing here inside of response. And we can say, hey, if that status code here is 200, cool, that means it got the data and we're good to go. So then I can say joke, set up a new variable, and I can say take that response that request gave us, right, that request returned to us right here, and I'm going to convert it into a JSON format. Because when it comes back, you know, as this, we can't do a whole lot with it. So what we want to do is convert it into JSON so we can actually pull things out. And we want to convert it into like a usable object here, right? Or dictionary, because we're in Python. We want to convert this into a dictionary so we can actually start pulling things out. So I can say, hey, give me the value, or give me the URL, or give me the updated at. stuff like that. So that's what this .json does. And just to see, we can print out joke, what that looks like after it's been converted. Okay, we don't really need this anymore because we've already seen that gives us 200 when it works. So let's save it, still running. All right, let's go to it again. Okay, and then there it is. This is after we convert it to JSON. This is what we're getting. And this looks like an object or a dictionary, right? So now inside a joke is contained all this stuff from the API. Notice how we have categories, right? Categories right here. Created at. So now it's been converted into a data format that we can actually use and play around with, right? So now I can say return. Now we can actually make this happy, right? It's wanting us to return something valid. So I can return JSONify is what I'm going to use. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I'm going to say, okay, I have a joke, and the joke's value is going to be joke value. Okay. So what we're doing here is now that we have joke converted into this dictionary, right? This object type thing that we can use, is I can return my own JSON now. And that's what JSONify is going to do, is JSONify is going to return this JSON object, and I get to decide what it is. Right here, it's returning JSON for us at the check Norris API. Well, we can do a similar thing. This is my server, man. I can have it do whatever I want. So I'm going to return, just like here they gave us JSON, I'm going to return my own JSON object. I'm going to say, look, I'm going to return some JSON that has a key of joke, and the value of that is going to be the value of joke. Well, what is that? This, right? When we say value here, we're talking about this key here. Because remember, joke is this object or this dictionary. And so I can say joke value, and that's going to give me this string. So now I'm returning my own JSON. It's going to have a key of joke, and the value of that is going to be the joke from the API. Okay. Yeah, heck yeah. Let's see if it works. Save it. All right, let's go to it. Okay, cool. Now everything's great. Now I'm pretty much doing not the exact same thing, but the same thing as what this API is doing. This API gives me some JSON data back. So does this. I'm giving some JSON data back from an API that I called. I called the Chuck Norris API. I converted it into a dictionary or an object here that I can use. And then I returned my own JSON that I defined. A key with joke and a value of the joke from the API. And that's what we get here. So this is pretty cool stuff. And like I mentioned, is we can have these routes do like a call to a database, and then it gets the database information back, and then it returns it. Or like I said, you can return full-blown websites with these API or with these backends and these endpoints and things. Okay, let's get this finished up. So if we get a status code at 200, we told it what to do. If we don't, I'm just going to return a JSON object here that just says error, I don't know, failed the fetch joke, something like that. So it's going to return JSON no matter what. If it works, it'll give me JSON with the joke. If it doesn't work, it'll give me JSON with the error message here. Okay, and we can kind of test that out by like breaking this URL. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Error. Failed the fetch joke. Okay. Cool. One other thing before we end here is I've been doing all these requests through my browser. Well, there's sometimes when you need to do other requests like post and put and patch and things like that. Browser can't do that. So that's where you would need something called Postman. This is free. Or I may go into this in other videos because Postman is one that's used a lot. Or you can come over here to the extensions, and there is one called Thunder Client. So you can do a search for Thunder Client. They both do pretty much the same thing. And I like Thunder Client because it's in Visual Studio Code. You don't have to go to a different program or anything. But yeah, Thunder Client, you can get that installed. And what that does is it allows you to do requests as well. So I can, once you've installed Thunder Client, it's going to be right here. So I'm going to click on it and I'm going to say new request. And it opens up in its own little tab here. And I'm going to do a get request, and see here, this is where you can change all the different requests. So if you want to do a post, put, delete, or whatever, here we're just doing get. So I'm going to do a get request to my server. All right, so 127.001.5000 joke. Okay. And then I can right click this, say split to the right, bring it over. Then we can always kind of move this over. I'm going to head back there. And yeah, it gets kind of squished, but it's only because I've zoomed in. But now I can do my requests inside of Visual Studio Code. I can bring this down and I can say, all right, do a get request at this URL at this endpoint. I'll hit send. And then notice how it does the same thing, but it's telling me the status. Oh, I think I can do that. Yeah, there we go. So when we return JSON, we do the JSONify, we hit the little comma here, and then we can tell it what status code to return, because right, that didn't make sense, right? We were getting this error, things weren't working, but yet it still said the status code was 200. Don't want that, right? So we would want to, and man, you can totally look these up, but it's just, there's a bunch of them. Just Google them, response status codes. There are a bunch. Server error responses, that's pretty much what we want, is somewhere in the 500s. So, but it's a good idea to look these up and kind of figure out, okay, which one should it be? But if we head down to like the 500s, internal server error, yeah, this is kind of the generic error. I like that one. We'll use that 500. So yeah, we just put the comma here, 500, save it. So now when there's an error, right, it'll give us the correct error code instead of telling us 200 when things weren't right. Okay, but then, right, can move this over. If I go back and I fix that, then hopefully everything's good now. Now I can do my request. Okay, and it worked. I got my 200. So Chuck Norris is by far the most violent member of the Wu-Tang Clan. Okay. But anyways, yeah. So that's Flask. It's pretty cool stuff, being able to do API requests with it. There's a bunch of different things you can do with Flask. This is just barely scratching the surface. But at least now you have an idea of how to create these endpoints, how to make API calls, and how to play around with the data that comes back. So hopefully that tutorial helped you guys out a little bit. And, like usual, just want to say, burn the bugs, man, not the bacon. We'll see you around.